Lady Death is the gripping memoir of Lyudmila Pavlichenko, the most lethal female sniper in history. Dive into the harrowing and heroic account of a young Soviet woman who became a legend during World War II with 309 confirmed kills. Let's begin. The commander always shoots first, and this serves as a signal for the remainder of the group, who await it impatiently and then quickly proceed to carry out the order given in this unusual way. We unleashed a hail of fire from 3 points. The bullets flew into the grey-green crowd, began to make mincemeat of them, and knocked the enemy to the ground. The Germans did not have their weapons with them and could not immediately respond. In any case, many were already dead within the first few minutes of the attack. Among this number were the junior officer and the cook, who had received a hot gift in the head from my Sveta. The artillery major leapt out of the house on hearing the shots and shouts. A bullet got him between the eyes. Not for nothing had I devoted so much time to studying this position. The old ranger was also firing, and quite accurately. He felled an orderly. We charged towards the house across the clearing, which was covered with Nazi bodies. I pulled the major's documents out from his tunic pocket, used my Finnish-style knife to cut off one epaulette and the metallic knight's cross, and took the Walther officer's pistol from the black leather holster at his waist. Meanwhile, the scouts burst into the building, firing their submachine guns. They wanted to grab staff papers. "Partisanen!" came a shout from inside. The corporal radio operator did not manage to impart any more to his superiors, as he had taken a bullet in the chest. Everything lying in front of him on the desk, maps, orders, reports, code books, ended up in the hands of the brave soldiers of the 54th Stepan Razin Rifle Regiment. As they ran back, they also grabbed a tightly packed knapsack hanging on the wall and took an MP. 40 submachine gun from the chest of a sentry lying by the doorway. The group left the scene of combat as swiftly as it had attacked. We ran through the forest for almost 1.5 kilometers. We were heading away to the southeast along a hunter's trail known to Vartanov. He was leading us towards no man's land, but we could not cross it in daytime. The ranger had a distant place in mind, a wooden shack, half dug into the earth not far from a spring, surrounded by tall trees, with thick undergrowth of wild rose and prickly juniper. There we collapsed onto the ground from overwhelming fatigue. Vartanov, who had not been into his house but observed our action from the clearing, nobly offered to be sentry. The rest of us lay down on the soft reddish-brown conifer needles under the wild rose and dropped off into the deep sleep of the soldier. 3 hours later, it was as if an alarm clock had gone off. I opened my eyes. There was something different about the forest. The wind had died down, and it had become much colder. The air temperature had dropped below 5 degrees, and a thick, milky colored cloud was slowly descending down the slopes of the hill. Waiting to be immersed in it, the trees seemed to freeze and stretch upwards. The old ranger had told me the truth. They feared the mist of autumn. Vartanov, together with Fyodor Sedik, were organizing things down by the spring. They had dug a hole and built a small fire. Its smoke mingled with the mist, and was therefore not dangerous to the group. Over the fire hung a fair-sized pot, not ours, but found in the area. The water came to the boil. The soldiers laid out their mugs, flasks, thickly cut hunks of bread, and cubes of pea puree, concentrate, which would be dissolved in the boiling water. With a smile, Fyodor showed me the German knapsack. That the scouts had deftly taken from the wall of the room in the confusion. The booty proved very opportune, as it contained foodstuffs completely unobtainable by the rank-and-file defenders of Sevastopol. I gave permission to use them immediately. They were probably the major's rations: tins of sardines in oil, several bars of chocolate, packets of dry biscuits, a stick of smoked salami wrapped in foil, and a 1.5-liter flask of brandy. The scouts were gleefully rubbing their hands in anticipation of a feast. They realized that the raid on the enemy headquarters had been very successful. In their view, I was directly connected with this success, and the soldiers addressed me with respect. While dinner was being prepared, I occupied myself with my own trophies. First of all, I examined the Walther pistol closely. This was the first time that a weapon of this kind had fallen into my hands. From Romanian officers, I tended to encounter more often the fairly clumsy Austrian 1912 type Steyr, the light 1934 model Italian Beretta, the powerful 1908 model German Luger Parabellum, and the 1895 pattern gas seal Nagant revolvers, Belgian designed but usually Russian made, which I did not like because of the time that was wasted reloading their cylinders cartridge by cartridge. The Walther P. 38 was undoubtedly one of the best examples of German military industry dating from the Second World War. It was compact, simple to use and look after, and suitable for the most varied tasks. The pistol stood out for its reliable safety catch. Apart from that, it operated with a soft touch on the trigger. Its trigger mechanism also allowed for single and double action cocking. As became clear later, Captain Bezrodny also had a good opinion of the Walther. I managed to work out a few things in the Nazi officer's documents, for instance, his name, date of birth, and the sites of the battles where the major had been involved. His decorated military path had led through Czechoslovakia, France, and Poland. One photo showed a beautiful fair-haired woman with her arms around two adolescent boys, looking directly at the camera and smiling. Inscribed neatly in black ink on the back were the words "Mein Herz, mit Liebe, Anna." A fairly lengthy letter from her was there too. I could not read it, though I noticed that the major had written a reply to his wife, but not had time to send it. Yes, indeed, my dear Baron Clement Karl Ludwig von Steingel, this is no France. The Russians do not surrender their main cities without a fight, so there was no point in you turning up here with tanks and cannon, I thought, and put the enemy papers away in my field bag. Vadanov and Sidik set up a proper table on the flat rock. Pomima opened the tins of sardines, cut up the salami, poured the soup into some aluminum bowls found in the area, and the brandy into, soldiers' mugs, having divided it in fraternal fashion into 7 portions. Leonid Burov cautiously handed me a mug, and the soldiers kept quiet in anticipation of a word from me. "We've done very well, lads. May we always have such luck," I said. Brandy burns the throat and warms the insides. Other people's food sharpens the taste. And soup from concentrate boiled on the march over an open fire seems most appetizing of all in a circle of people who have just faced mortal danger together. There is in such company an amazing feeling of togetherness, which I value very highly. Not without good reason did our ancestors feast on the battlefield when they had routed the enemy. A large cup of wine or a home-brewed beer would be passed around the brotherhood, and everyone could moisten his lips with the sweet beverage of victory. During our quiet conversation about who fired how, who ran where, and what they saw of interest in the brief minutes of the clash, Vartanov remained silent for a whole hour, but then, suddenly, he raised his voice. The old ranger solemnly requested to be accepted into the ranks of the sniper platoon and to be taught the art of sharpshooting, so he could wipe out the enemy like we had in this area next to his house, next to the graves of those close to him. He said that from now on his heart would be at rest, and that, in gratitude, he would teach us bold, successful young soldiers how to live and hunt in the Crimean forest. I heard roughly the same verdict from Captain Bezrodny when I presented him with a report and our trophies, German staff papers, documents found on the dead officer, and his decorations and major's epaulette. He did not conceal his pleasure at the information we had obtained. Taking advantage of his good mood, I asked about the ranger and recommended that he be accepted for permanent service despite being beyond call-up age. I reinforced my request with a gift, Baron von Steingel's pistol, and this had the desired effect. Putting the weapon away in his desk drawer, the captain promised to discuss this matter with the regimental commander, Major Marusievich. In the end, Red Army volunteer Anastas Artashesovich Vartanov was recognized as a soldier of our platoon. Later, in a 54th Regiment order, gratitude to us was voiced for the bravery and ingenuity shown in the raid into the enemy rear. All the snipers, including me, were credited with a personal score of 7 dead Nazis. Although, who could now count those soldiers and junior officers in grey-green uniforms who remained lying next to the field kitchen we had shot up? In my estimate, there were at least 60 men killed or left with wounds either serious in the stomach or light. At the beginning of December 1941, the weather in the Sevastopol defense district was gloomy and foul, with light frosts at night. This did not prevent the defenders of the city from toiling to improve the field fortifications which had suffered during the first assault. The gun emplacements were repaired and equipped with telephone communication, and the trenches and communication passages were deepened. Even the senior command kept a watch on the works on the front lines of our 25th Chapayev Division. We were often visited by Major General Petrov, Vice Admiral Oktyabrski, and members of the Military Council of the Coastal Army and the Black Sea Fleet. Amidst the thick greenery of the bushes, we descend to a communication passage, and I led my superiors to the trench of the first line of defense, Divisional Commander Trofim Kolomiets recalled later. The winding road is almost undetectable from above. It is laid under spreading bushes. Only here and there was it necessary to cover it with logs and mask it with stones. Not far away from the trench is a fork. A telephone is placed in a niche. A plaque indicates the way to the nearest medical station. Such is the trench. There is no need to stoop. It is excavated to the depth of a man's height. A soldier from the current watch reports that in his observation sector the enemy is quiet. From the trench, a passage leading off in the direction of no man's land is carefully camouflaged by branches of evergreen juniper bushes tied to stakes. Over there is a double trench, I explain. They extend another 5 or 6 meters out front. Trenches like this reduce losses in artillery attacks. The enemy strikes at the trench line, but our troops are in front of it, and it's more convenient to conduct observations from there. In the trench are 2 soldiers. There is a small awning over them. Grenades and spare machine gun drums are spread out on a bedding of wood. On a peg driven into the wall hangs a flask of water. Some quite roomy company dugouts had now been excavated 500 meters from the front line. There, 2 or 3 pot-bellied stoves had been installed, as well as some long benches along the walls, which had been reinforced by planks. A kind of club atmosphere developed here. When they were off duty, the soldiers would gather there in the evening. Young Communist League and party gatherings, political information sessions for personnel, and officers' meetings were held there. Life on the front was much improved by the commissioning of a bathhouse and laundry service on the north side. The quartermasters found the building and repaired it with the help of the local population. Now soldiers' visits to the bathhouse from the front line became regular. At the same time, they had their linen changed, and the course of trench life lease did not lead to wholesale infestation during the defense of Sevastopol. The lull in fighting and the transition to a positional war demanded a change of tactics from the snipers. They became more important participants in resisting the Fritzes. Constant observation of no man's land, reconnaissance, hunting for enemy soldiers and officers on their front line. That was what we now faced. For a start, we had to study thoroughly the firing line assigned to our battalion, the first, the space in front of it, including no man's land, and those positions which the Nazis from the 132nd Infantry Division of the Wehrmacht had set up for themselves. We were on the northern slopes of the Kamishli Gully, about 1.5 kilometers to the west of height 278.4. The long gentle slope had a peculiar surface, small dips, rises and limestone rocks. The forest cover was uneven, and there were both wide glades and almost impenetrable thickets, as well as piles of fallen trees that had been smashed by shellfire. Growing here were the main Crimean species: sessile oak, smooth elm, maple, forest apple, white acacia, black sambucus, quite a big tree, incidentally, up to 6 meters in height, and wild juniper, both trees and bushes. All this knowledge I gained from Vartanov, who accompanied Fyodor Sedych, my sniper lookout, and me in journeys along no man's land and some adjacent sectors, which had been occupied by the Germans. We were seeking out suitable spots for sniper hideouts of various kinds: open, closed, and base hideouts, reserve hideouts, decoy hideouts, hideouts conducive to a swift attack, and others set up for a speedy withdrawal. The deep reticulated communication passages excavated in the peninsula's stony soil by Soviet sappers and by ordinary infantrymen looked out directly onto no man's land. They helped us to get out onto it without being noticed, even in the daytime, although the best time for a sharpshooter is an hour and a half after midnight. We took small sappers' spades with us, and sometimes a pick, axe, and big knives. To set up a closed position, we used folding metal frames, armored shields, and fake tree stumps made from whatever material was at hand, especially sliced up car tires stuck to bark. In the fake positions, there was space for a dummy, a mannequin in a helmet and overcoat, and a mirror thrust into a split wooden peg. However, there were spots I was particularly fond of. For instance, a deep trench amidst juniper thickets, where the ground, sprinkled with several layers of blue-green conifer needles, was not only soft, and warm, but gave off a pleasant scent, which was also intolerable to various kinds of forest parasites. Consequently, there were no mosquitoes, ants, bark-eating beetles, wasps, flies, or other sniper's foes that would prevent him or her from concentrating and remaining stationary for hours on end. Behind a greyish-white limestone slab, concealing the position well from the left, lay a large sessile oak felled by the wind, and half rotten with age. Ivy had wound itself in a weird fashion around its massive boughs, which were spread out in different directions. The jet-black barrel of a rifle, thrust between uneven shoots, looked, of course, to the inexperienced eye like a twig. Between the branches one could set up a rifle very conveniently, and it was also possible to lie resting on a tree when the forest ground was damp. I came to like the garland rose with its repulsive thorns. It was an amazing and wonderful plant. Its thickets and these fine, low trees always grow in groups, created the effect of a lace curtain spread across the bases of the elms, maples, and acacias. All easily distinguishable outlines disappeared. Smoke from a shot also quickly dispersed in their midst. My inscribed SAT E40 was not suitable for hunting in the forest. After thoroughly cleaning it, including sluicing out the barrel with washing soda and greasing it with rifle oil, I wrapped Major General Petrov's gift in sacking, then put it in a cover and hung it on the wall in my dugout. The Sveta could have a rest and just be a parade weapon for a while. My working weapon would be an unfailingly reliable 3-line. It fired more quietly, was more accurate, and the PE sight offered fourfold magnification. With a Mosin rifle over my shoulder, a cartridge pouch hanging from my belt, a TT pistol, a finished knife in a metal sheath, a flask, small sapper's spade in a cover, and 2 grenades, Fyodor Sadik and I would set out after midnight for no man's land and one of our fox holes, as we termed our set-up snipers' positions or hideouts. We found the way by means of gashes on tree trunks or special markings left earlier. Even so, the locality had to be learned by heart like Pushkin's verses at school. We usually spent several hours in our position, observing the Fritz's front line through binoculars. Whatever changes occurred there, individual soldiers and officers appearing, earthworks, on fortifications, or the construction of new machine gun nests, movements of machinery, sentry changes, the timing of field kitchens, the arrival of orderlies at the staff headquarters dugout, the laying of telephone cables between different sectors, sappers working on new minefields and other similar things. All this we wrote down, marked on maps, and reported to our battalion commander, Lieutenant Dromin. It should be mentioned that at the beginning of December 1941, the Germans conducted themselves in a rather carefree way on the front line. They walked between their positions at full height. They probably thought that the Russians did not have snipers, and therefore a no man's land of 150, 200 meters in width was an impenetrable barrier to accurate bullets. We put an end to this almost immediately, wiping out about 12 men in the course of 2 days, 10 soldiers and 2 officers. The response was an insane mortar attack. For an hour or two, the Nazis fired 5 centimeters, Leibas, Gierschrabwe, 36, the light mortars that they kept in every infantry platoon. From one foxhole, we would instantly switch to another one that had been equipped in the depths of the forest, and from there we would observe mortar bombs weighing 910 grams exploding by our former refuge among the trees, lighting up with little orange puffs and scattering dozens of small splinters all around. I used to refer to such enemy action as a concert of German classical music. There were times when I would set off on my own into the enemy rear. This could only be done on one very small sector of no man's land, where the forest turned into an impenetrable thicket. The old ranger showed me a barely traceable trail there, which was concealed by tall bushes of wild rose and hornbeam. You had to make your way through the undergrowth, alternately crawling, doubled up, or using a knife to slash the hanging branches. The trail brought you out onto a dirt road, which ran within roughly half a kilometer of the German front line. It turned out that soldiers of the Wehrmacht's 132nd Infantry Division were very fond of this road. It connected, judging from the documents later found on their dead, the command points of two of its regiments, the 436th and the 438th. I chose a firing position beyond the bend in the road, the sides of which were covered with wild rose. Under the bushes I made a shallow trench with a parapet of stones and concealed it with turf. The soil here tended to crumble, and therefore the work went well and did not take long. As well as that, I used a ploy I had known since my days of study at the Osoaviakhim sniper school. I buried a flask half full of water, placed one end of a rubber tube in its neck, and held the other end to my ear. In this way, the sounds of steps, movement of machinery, and earthworks were easily detected. To recognize such sounds, or rather traces of sounds, a sharpshooter must become all ears. That is, forget about everything around and concentrate attention to the maximum, which demands a great expenditure of energy. The protective forest required a similar renunciation of one's own existence. You had to dissolve within it, become silent, immobile, as if you were an arboreal being yourself. Vartanov could sense this on his skin, breathe in rhythm with it, and understand superbly all its signs and manifestations. For me, a natural-born townie, it was not easy to achieve this state. It took a huge effort of will. I heard the noise of a motorbike engine through the tube long before the rider himself appeared on the road. I took a cartridge with a yellow-tipped D-type heavy bullet from the inside pocket of my padded jacket and pushed it into the chamber. A soldier in a black leather jacket stopped by a wild rose bush to enjoy its dark red berries. Rose hips are generally better collected in late autumn, dried and consumed as tea. Possibly the Fritz did not know that. He got carried away, gathering the semi-frozen berries in the palms of his hands and trying to sample them. The shot rang out loud in the silence of the cold, early winter morning, but the road was otherwise empty at that time, and there was nothing to threaten me. I quickly pulled his documents out of his pocket and took the field bag bulging with papers, which hung by a long strap from the shoulder of the dead man. I also acquired his MP 40 submachine gun and 2 spare ammunition clips for it. Nothing else was found on the motorbike rider other than a packet of cigarettes and a lighter. His vehicle, a light single-cylinder DKW RT 125, was standing at the roadside. Enemy machinery had to be put out of commission at all costs. I had to shoot out its motor. I did not dare to shoot at its petrol tank, as a fire would attract enemy attention to the road, and I still had to get out of there. For a lone sniper, hitting the target is only half the job. The second half, no less important, is getting back to your unit, safe and sound. In August 1941, I wrote to my sister that I intended to raise my tally to 1,000 Nazis, but before you can wipe out the 1,000th cut throat, you have to survive 999 times after taking an accurate shot at an enemy who wishes to kill you whatever the cost. Of course, I would like to have followed the rule I laid down for myself. No day without a dead enemy, but alas, it did not always work out like that. In the first place, the Fritzes became much more careful. They began, like us, to dig themselves deep into the ground. Secondly, the enemy strengthened its observation of no man's land. At night, the Nazis often let off flares, and in the daytime, they engaged in unsettling machine gun and mortar fire. German reconnaissance groups started operating on this same territory, and if they discovered our hideouts, they would destroy them or lay mines. One of our sniper pairs was blown up on December 11th by an anti-personnel mine hidden near a fallen oak tree. Thus perished Leonid Burov and another soldier of my platoon, who had also joined the 54th Regiment from the Naval Infantry. However, for the first half of December 1941, life on the front lines of the Sevastopol defense lines passed in relative calm. In good weather, both German aircraft and our own launched raids, ships of the Black Sea Fleet, the cruisers Krasnaya, Krim, and Krasny Kavkaz, the destroyer Leader Kharkov, the destroyers Zheleznyakov, Sposobny, and Nezamozhnik regularly fired into the enemy rear with long-distance ordnance. We rejoiced when their 180 and 102 mm shells hissed over our heads. There were occasions when Soviet units up to 1 or 2 companies strong conducted reconnaissance by combat on some sectors of the front. The Fritzes did exactly the same. For instance, on December 8th, a strong salvo was heard much further to the west of our battalion's positions, beyond the Kamishli railway bridge, which had been blown up not so long before. It was the 8th Marine Infantry Brigade, with powerful artillery support, which first drove the enemy out of the positions they had occupied. But the following day, when the Fritzes brought in their own assault aircraft and tanks, they retreated. This concludes the 11th part of the story. Thank you very much for listening. What do you think of Pavlichenko's story? Please subscribe for more episodes and leave a comment.